Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
What's going on, Fantasy Champs? My name's Morgan Colby. I got Rick Lemon with me, as always, Poppin' Ricardo.
What's up?
We are back for the last episode of Week 17. As I said on Tuesday's show, without Rick here, we will still do next week 2 episodes. Only 2, because there's no Thursday Night Football. But we're still going to do waiver wire ads and recap the week, and we're still going to talk about some starts and sits for those idiots who like to do those Week 18 championships where no one's playing. So we'll get you with that. And then, you know what it is? It's time to prepare for fantasy football 2024.
Yeah, and we just do our yearly recap as well.
Yeah, so it'll be wild. But we are going to do starts and sits on this episode. Break down some guys that you should put in your starting lineup. Break down some guys that you should probably sit this week. We'll do it expeditiously. But before we do that, check out our website, fantasychampions.com. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platforms, please leave a review. Share this pod with your friends. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe. Click the bell for notifications, like, and comment down below. Why don't we just say, let's get started?
Yeah.
Why not?
I think that's a good call.
We'll get you in and out real quick so you can get your lineups together and go to your New Year's parties and drink.
Okay.
You know what starts this weekend? The college football playoff.
Oh, yeah.
Very excited. I don't know if I'm a Michigan fan or an Alabama fan, so hold me back.
Either way, though. So is it Michigan versus Alabama?
I believe so, yeah.
Oh, I don't even know who to root for. I'm not crazy about either.
The other game is Washington versus... I don't know.
Somebody?
I talked about this.
Washington versus Georgia, right?
No.
Is Georgia in it?
Nope. They kept them out. They were the one.
Really? It's not Florida State, because that was
Yeah, it's Washington versus Texas.
Oh, Texas made it?
Yeah, so here's the weird scenario. Here's the weird scenario that happened with this. Texas went 12-1. Alabama went 12-1. Alabama beat Georgia, but the selection committee for college football says that they heavily weight a win over another team as...
Wait, should Georgia have really not been in the college football playoff?
Yes, so this is what everyone was talking about. But
because
this is what I was going to say, is that the committee takes into heavy consideration, like it's an important factor, if one team in the CFB beats another team in the CFB in the regular season. So early in the regular season, Texas beat Alabama for Alabama's only loss. So everyone was saying that Texas should stay ahead of Alabama in the standings. And at the time, before Alabama beat Georgia, they were like 7-8. So then Bama beat Georgia. And because Bama beat Georgia, the committee was like, well, that means for us, Bama's better than Georgia. So Bama makes it in, and then Georgia's going to be behind them. But because Texas beat Alabama, then that must mean that Texas is better than Georgia. So we're going to make them the 3, Alabama the 4, and Georgia the 6. Or the 5, or whatever it is. And I'm like, what the hell are you guys doing? Because
and Florida State went undefeated, didn't they?
Florida State went undefeated, but they lost their quarterback. And
so they didn't want to put him in.
The games were like 10-7 for the last 2 games of the season. They did. If they went into the college football playoff, they went undefeated. They would have played Michigan, and the game would have been 52-0. It would have been a bloodbath. That's why they didn't put him in,
I guess.
So Michigan versus Alabama should be interesting. Washington and Texas should be interesting. That starts this weekend. But regardless, we're here to talk about...
Am I crazy to say, I know one last thing, am I crazy to say that I'd rather watch the Texas-Washington game?
Yeah, because you want to watch Penix. You want to watch Penix and the Texas quarterback who's going to come out next year. Yes. Correct. Meanwhile, I got McCarthy and Milrow over there in the Alabama game. But anyway, let's do some starts and sits. What say you, Rick?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. All right, let's start with the quarterbacks. I'll start with mine. It's Matt Stafford at the New York Giants. Stafford has been an interesting play. He's
been on fire.
He's been on fire. He certainly hasn't been matchup proof in any way, shape, or form. But since week 12, he's had 28, 25, 26, 20, 22. Those are extrapolated. Let me switch leagues. And pull up the Matt Stafford numbers so that I don't get the 5. You know what? Next year, I say we just switch our league back to 4 because I'm sick of this crap. He had 24, 22, 23, 18, and 20 over the course of those games, 12 to 16. So he's been really, really good. He's playing the Giants.
His last 4 games, 10 touchdowns, 0 interceptions.
Last 5. Yeah, his last 4 games. Oh, my God, dude. He's still good at football, huh?
Yeah, I don't know what happened at the beginning of the year. Was it just because Cooper Kupp was out?
I don't know. Kyron also missed time. Matt Stafford's the QB2 from week 12 to 16, though. So he's been fantastic. The big thing for me when you look at this situation is that the Giants are not fantastic. They're a terrible defense. They're a terrible football team. And their defense is actually okay. They give up, I think, 16.5 fantasy points to the quarterback position because it's a plus matchup. I think you will see a situation where and they got to win the game too to stay in the playoff chase here. But I think they're 8-6, the Rams.
Yes. I want to say
yeah, I believe so. So anyway, Matt Stafford at the Giants. I think this is a good matchup for him. I would start him this week if you're looking for a quarterback. Good decisions.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think Stafford, the way he's been playing, he went from literally having the same amount of touchdowns and interceptions in the beginning of the season to if they won a couple more games earlier in the year, he'd probably be in the MVP conversation. That's how much he's been on a tear the last 4 or 5 weeks. But I have Justin Fields versus the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons is a good matchup. Fields usually plays decent against the Falcons too. It is his hometown team that he was hoping he would get drafted by and then didn't. So he's always got a little thing when he plays Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
But Atlanta is a good matchup. He kind of against Arizona wasn't really that great through the air, but he had 97 rushing yards and a touchdown. I think versus Atlanta, he could do the same thing with his legs again. And then if he has any better of a game passing, then that's just extra. But even without the passing last week, he still got 25 fantasy points. So I think Fields is a lock for 20 plus this week.
Yeah, I agree. He's lights out.
Yeah.
All right, my sit this week is Tua at Baltimore. I've talked about this before. Tua has been a sit for me every time he plays a tough defense. He's playing Baltimore this week. Yes. This is for the 1 seed.
It is for the 1 seed.
This is for the 1 seed. And likely whoever wins it, you know what? Yeah, there's only 2 games left, and they're tied at 11-3. So if
Baltimore's 12-3, I think.
Oh.
And then I think the Dolphins are 11-4.
Oh, okay. All right. Wait, hold on a second.
But it's still likely for the 1 seed. I mean, if the Dolphins win, they'd have to beat the Bills, so maybe not.
They are 11-4, and the Ravens are 12-3. So you are correct. Yeah. So either way, this is for the division. I mean, this is for the 1 seed, most likely.
Yep.
Tua, on the other hand, has not played well since week 12. He's had 8, 19, 7, 12, 14. Against these tougher defenses, the Jets in week 12, he had 8 points. Against the Jets again in week 15, he had 12. Against Dallas, he had 14. Against Tennessee, who's been good against the pass this year, 7. Against Kansas City, he had 11. Against the easier matchups on his schedule, he went off. New England, he had 11 points in week 1. So, the chances of him going off against one of the, I would say right now, outside of San Francisco, Baltimore probably has the best defense in the NFL right now. They have played lights out football all year. I don't want Tua in this game. I know you probably are looking at him and going, he's a QB 13, he's been fine, and he's No, I don't
No,
care. 7,
not
12,
against
14
Baltimore.
sucks. And going up
And
against
even
Baltimore, not good.
yeah, last 3 weeks or last 2 weeks, because Tennessee was actually not a bad match. We just didn't play good. But the last 2 weeks against good defenses, 14, 15 fantasy points. Probably expect another 14, 15-point win from Tua. Also, as a Patriots fan, you should be rooting for the Ravens this week. Because if the Dolphins lose, that strength of schedule thing goes up.
Ooh, that's true.
Or goes down, which is good for the Patriots.
That's true.
So go Ravens.
Does it count as a playoff win for Lamar if they get a bye week?
That does not count as a playoff win, but if they win in the divisional round with home field advantage, that will count as a playoff win. So yeah, should we? Oh wait, no, I have to say my set. Jared Goff versus Detroit. He's been cooking, and the Lions have been cooking. But last time they were cooking this good, and he was cooking this good, I was like, let's pump the brakes. I think he's due for a bad game. And then he got what did he do? I think he got like 9 fantasy points that week. That was early in the season against Baltimore. I'm going to say it's the same thing. He's in Dallas against the Cowboys. Their defense has been pretty good this year.
Mm-hmm.
They held Tua last week to 15. I think Micah Parsons is a beast, and they will get to Jared Goff. The Lions do have a very good offensive line, so this is kind of a good matchup, and it should be a fun game. But I'm going to take the line, or I'm going to say that the Cowboys defense does get to Goff enough where it affects him. I don't think this is a game where Goff gets 5 touchdowns or goes off or anything like that. I'd probably expect like a 15-point week out of him.
Okay, yeah, I like that one. Let's move to the running back position. My start this week, Ty Chandler. Ooh,
whoa, your arch nemesis.
Yeah, well, he still blows, but the Vikings were like, you know what? We're just gonna go with all the backups. Just gonna go with all the backups here because we like them better. He, over the last 3 weeks, has had a 56, 81, and 65% snap percentage. He had 24 fantasy points against Cincinnati in week 15, and then he only had 7 last week. 8 carries, 17 yards, 2.13 yards per carry. Brutal. But he did score a touchdown. It seems as though he has now taken over the goal line work and the main share of the carries for the Minnesota Vikings. So because of that, I feel like at this point, Ty Chandler is the guy for Minnesota, and it's not Alexander Mattison. I would kick Alexander Mattison straight to the curb this week. Don't even think about starting him. But I think against Green Bay, like obviously against Detroit, he struggled. But against Green Bay, I think he can come out this week, have a really good performance. Green Bay on the season here has given up a total of 20 fantasy points a game to the running back position because Chandler's probably going to get a majority of the work. I would say that this is going to be a good week for him, at least 12 to 15 fantasy points. So if you need a play and a second flex, I'd go with Ty Chandler if you have the opportunity.
Okay, I like it. That's an interesting one, but not bad. I have Tony Pollard. So a guy that you might be thinking is probably a start no matter what, but he has really struggled, especially in the last couple of weeks. And I know someone like you have him on your team, might be disappointed in the season that he has had. But he has had some good weeks in there, like that stretch we had some easy matchups, week 11, week 12, week 13. He was putting up fantasy points. Last 2 weeks, though, he has really struggled with 5 and 7. Up against Detroit, it's a good matchup for him. I think this is a bounce back week for Pollard where he gets another 17 to 20 point week.
Okay. Yeah, I like that. I sit at running back. We talked about, I can't do this one. All right, Rick, you go with your sit.
Oh, okay. I'll say James Conner versus Philly. That was a good catch, by the way.
That was
Philly's
so close.
defense has been very up and down this year, and it's been mostly disappointing.
Yeah.
But they have still been very good against the run. In the Cardinals, James Conner has had his moments, but I would not be betting on the running back to have a big game against the Eagles. He has had some really good weeks last couple of weeks with Kyler out there, and some touchdowns every single week. But again, just not really a good matchup. And if I have better options, I would stay away from them.
That is a fantastic choice. I'm going to go with the Seattle running backs versus Pittsburgh. I know Kenneth Walker, I think, had a good week last week, but I don't want anything to do with the Pittsburgh defense. It's a good defense. They give up Currently, I should pull up the numbers. They give up a total of what is it? 14?
It's pretty good.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I'm trying to find the friggin' number. I think it's 18 fantasy points per game to the running back position. So, and especially if they're splitting snaps, it doesn't look like it's going to be a great week for the Seattle running back. So I'd sit him this week if I had the opportunity. All right, let's move to the wide receiver position. I have Rashee Rice. Dude, this is it. Finally, I mean, the Chiefs offense looks terrible, but we finally have a freaking receiver for the Chiefs who actually looks good.
Yeah.
He has, since week 12, 24, 14, 17, 23, and 11 in total fantasy points. And at wide receiver in fantasy football, that is wide receiver 10 over that stretch of time. So
been a beast.
He has kind of come on the scene. Now, I was talking about last week before the games like that Rashee Rice could be a league winner if he continues his pace. He had 12 targets, 6 catches, 57 yards, so disappointed a little bit this week against the Raiders, but he's got Cincinnati this week, and if he goes out this week and puts up a ham 25 points, then I would consider him a league winner at this point because he's a dude that wasn't on a football team, or not that he wasn't on a football team, but he wasn't really drafted all that much, and he was most likely a waiver wire pickup for you. So I love Rashee Rice this week against Cincinnati. I think at this point, Cincinnati's not the greatest matchup in the world for Rashee Rice, but I will say, I think just purely based on what he's been doing recently, he has to be in your starting lineup, whether it's a flex or a wide receiver too. Like, I feel like he's got to be in your starting lineup this week. So roll him out there, play him. I love Rashee Rice.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to toot my own horn on him, but after week 12, I think, the first Raiders game, and you were on the same boat, but I said that we probably are going to look back at in the offseason at Rashee Rice as someone who, after the bye week, just exploded. One of those rookie seasons where, like, I think Ayuk had a similar rookie season where he reached like a certain point, and then he had like 5 straight weeks of like 20 straight points in the second half of the year. I think Rashee Rice is having a very similar run. I do think it continues in week 17. And he's going to be an interesting guy to talk about for next year and where he ends up getting drafted. My guy's Adam Thielen. We've obviously had a love-hate relationship with Adam Thielen. Mostly been telling you to stay away from him, saying that he was false gold. And we were true. I mean, and we were correct because he did come back down to earth. But he had a decent week last week, and it felt like Bryce Young kind of had his best game of the season, to be honest, last week against Green Bay, and might have hopefully unlocked some things. And against Jacksonville, it is a good matchup. In Jacksonville should be hopefully a good weather game, so good passing opportunities.
Yep.
And Thielen, if Bryce Young can keep up this play, is going to have some big weeks. He had 15 this past week without a touchdown. I think he gets another 15 this week with Jacksonville, and maybe if you add a touchdown in there, he could have a 20-point week.
Fair enough. Adam Thielen, man, you're going with the old man for one final ride.
I know. He's 33, dude. For a receiver, that's ancient.
Ancient history. Wide receiver, I got Dalton Kincaid. I got Deontay Johnson at the Seattle Seahawks. Could be interesting. Gonna be interesting. Seattle's just tough football team. They're not gonna win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith. I'll tell you that right now. But they're like one of those teams just.
They got some players.
Keep nipping at your heels like a little chihuahua. If there's enough of them, you're just gonna fall on the ground. It's what they do. Or like a bird flying in the sky, and it's like a bunch of vultures.
They're probably gonna get in.
They're probably gonna get in the playoffs. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have Deontay Johnson this week. Deontay Johnson has been up and down, hot and cold, in and out. It's been an interesting season for Deontay Johnson, and the quarterback switching hasn't really helped. But he's had some okay games since week 13. This week against Cincinnati, he's terrible. 3.5 fantasy points, so didn't work out for him. But going up against Seattle, not an easy matchup. Seattle has been pretty good defensively. They give up somewhere around 29 fantasy points a game, so they're right in the middle of the pack in terms of fantasy points given up to the wide receiver position. But I just don't think with their quarterback situation for the Pittsburgh Steelers and the situation for Deontay Johnson, especially with George Pickens now kind of coming onto the scene late in the season here, I just don't think it's a good play this week. So I would sit Deontay Johnson if you have the opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I agree. And I actually am sticking with it. And I'm going to say sit George Pickens this week. I know you said he has been coming on, and that is true. He had 195 receiving yards on 4 catches this week against Cincinnati. But that's kind of what my problem is with George Pickens is he's such a boomer bust type of player. He had the 195 yards on 4 catches on 6 targets. He hasn't had more than 7 targets since week 7. He's usually around 5 to 6 targets a game.
Yeah.
I just don't really trust that in a tough matchup. And it's possible that he could have a big game and he could have a couple big plays and save the week. But if he doesn't get those big plays, he's going to get about 6-7 fantasy points.
Yeah, agreed. Okay.
It's just hard to trust the Steelers anyway with Mason Rudolph. Dude, how many NFL teams right now are not only on their backup quarterback, but on their 3rd string quarterback? There's at least a handful.
Oh, dude.
We talked about on the Thursday preview, the Browns, the Jets, the Steelers, the Vikings.
Yeah.
Just off the top of my head, there's 4.
Not good. Not good for the
Not
NFL.
good for the NFL.
They need to I was talking about this before. Do you know why this is happening?
Houston too. Stroud's coming back, but they were playing Case Keenum because Davis Mills was hurt.
Do you know why this is happening though?
Why is that?
It's because the NFL and the NFLPA adjusted the practice restrictions for the preseason.
Yep.
And for training camp. And so you can only practice a certain amount, and they're not allowed to do anything but walkthroughs, and they can't hit each other, and they can't do it. So by the time you get into the season, longevity ain't a thing anymore because they're not used to getting hit.
So you're saying we need more practice time?
They need more practice time, and they need the ability to wreck each other in practice. So anyway,
you're right.
All right, let's move to the tight end position. I got at start for me Isaiah Likely versus the Miami Dolphins. I feel like that game is going to be a high-flying, soaring game for Baltimore. We'll see what happens with Miami. But Likely, he did have a stretch of games. This past week, he only had 8 points, but he had 19 and 18 the 2 weeks prior to that. So I think he gets back to that against Miami. A little bit easier of a defense, a little bit easier of a matchup. And I think it could be a good play for him this week. Hold on a second. I'm trying to pull up numbers. I'm pulling up the wrong show notes. Yeah, so Miami gives up about, they're middle of the pack. I think they give up about 8 fantasy points, 9 fantasy points a game to the tight end position. So it should be a good game for Likely. I think they'll target him in the middle of the field and get him some opportunity. So I'd start Likely this week.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have Darren Waller, and part of the reason I have Waller is Tyrod Taylor is getting to start this week. In the last game that Tyrod Taylor started, which, by the way, sad that the Danny DeVito run is now over because people realized that he wasn't good. That's another team, by the way, to add to the list with the 3rd string quarterbacks, the Giants. But anyway, yeah, and the Raiders too. Gosh, I was just looking at the schedule. Yeah, a lot of teams, really gross. But anyway, Tyrod Taylor's last start was week 7. Last start that he played the whole game because he got hurt in week 8. It was week 7 against the Commanders. That was a good matchup for quarterbacks, good matchup for tight ends. Tyrod Taylor had 21 fantasy points in that game. And Darren Waller had 22 fantasy points in that game. He had 7 catches, 97 yards, and a touchdown. So I like Tyrod Taylor matched up with Darren Waller against the Rams, who their defense has been kind of middle of the pack, but they have struggled against tight ends for some reason. So could be a good matchup for Darren Waller in a game that he bounces back in.
I like it. Darren Waller, man. It's one of the favorite breakouts this year, but the Giants, they like to kill hopes and dreams.
He also did miss he missed 6 games with the hamstring injury. So.
Oh yeah. All right, quickly with the last 2 guys, we got Dalton Kincaid versus New England for me as a sit at tight end. Listen, it's
Dawson
over.
Knox really killed him, huh?
Seriously, I wish I had adjusted sooner, but last week he had 48% snap percentage. This week I think he had 40, and like he's only had 4 targets in 2 weeks. If I made the fantasy championship in my home league, which is the one league that I had him in, I would probably have pivoted off him and went to somebody different. And I don't know who that would have been, but I would have found another tight end on the waiver wire because I just can't go to the fantasy championship knowing that my tight end is going to get 2 targets because the Bills decided to run the ball 600 times. So I'm sick and tired of it. I was considering putting Stephon Diggs on the sit list because he's been trashing the playoffs the last 2 years. Like, you'd love to think there's a bounce back game, but like, you're in the fantasy championship game. It might be time to make that sit. I don't know. I'm still contemplating it, but Kincaid, man, he just hasn't been it. Going up against New England makes it tough on players, and you know, I just, with his snap percentage and the situation that he has had since Dawson Knox has gotten back, I don't love it. Like I said, their new offense kind of runs the ball a lot more, which is more privy to Dawson Knox being on the field. And so it makes it really tough. I'd sit Dalton Kincaid. It sucks to end the season like this, but hey, roll it up for next year, Dalton. I'm coming for you.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's not just the Knox injury. As you said, they've just decided to switch from a passing team to a running team midseason, which has helped them, but not Dalton Kincaid or Diggs or any fantasy players except James Cook and maybe Josh Allen. But for me, I'm going with Kyle Pitts versus the Bears, and this has nothing to do with matchups or anything with the game, really. This is I hate Arthur Smith, and Kyle Pitts is not good for fantasy game of the week for me. Every time you trust Kyle Pitts, every time he has a good game, he goes right back to the crapper, and that's what's going to happen this week because Arthur Smith is a moron. Projecting like 3 targets, 2 catches, and like a 55% snap percentage for Kyle Pitts this week.
Yeah.
And the Bears, I mean, it is a good matchup, but the Bears, since like I want to say like week 10, ever since they got Sweat, he has kind of helped transform their defense a little bit, and their defense has been playing much, much better than it was in the beginning.
Oh yeah, for sure. Kyle Pitts is just terrible.
Yep.
I don't know if it's him or.
Well, did you see he made a touch? He got a touchdown this week. It was a great catch too. But he'll make these ridiculous catches that you like. Oh wow, that's insane! And then you look at the box score, and he had like a 50% snap percentage.
I feel like Arthur Smith
4 targets
is everything that is holding back the Falcons.
Yeah,
that's what's going on.
Well, they need a quarterback.
Taylor
Heineke is their quarterback right now. So,
all right. Well, there are your starts and sits. Any more thoughts or concerns or questions that you got?
I think that's gonna do it.
Okay. All right. There you go. Starts and sits for Week 17, your fantasy championships. This is it. This is what we all have come down to. This is what we all have been working towards for 9 months. It's a fantasy championship. Go out, win your league, and come back and celebrate in the comments, guys. We'll talk to you next week. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.